"You're so dumb," Martin sneered, as I scraped the burnt edges off the turkey. And then, as if twisting the knife, he laughed and said, "You know, I don't even know why I married you. I would have been better off with my ex." That was my Thanksgiving, at least the one I thought I'd be walking into. But when I got home that day, instead of insults and cold silence, I found something much worse. My husband was gone, and the note he left behind led me straight to the woman who would turn my entire life upside down. Before I tell you exactly what happened, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends. From the outside looking in, you would have thought I had it all. A picture-perfect life, a husband with an education, a decent job, a polished smile that could charm anyone in the room. A big house in the suburbs with white fences and trimmed hedges. The kind of life people point at and say, "She's lucky." But what they didn't know, what nobody ever saw, was that behind those walls, I was crumbling. Martin, my husband, had a tongue sharper than a blade. He never raised a fist at me, but his words cut deep enough to leave scars no one else could see. "Pathetic," he'd mutter when I burned dinner or forgot to iron his shirt. "Useless," he'd say when I tried to talk about my dreams of going back to school. And sometimes, when I stood too long in front of the mirror, wondering where I'd gone wrong, he'd laugh under his breath. "You really think anyone would look at you twice if not for me?" It wasn't just insults, it was the way he treated me, like I was furniture, something to sit on, lean against, but never really notice. An accessory he wore on his arm when he needed to look good in front of his colleagues, but nothing more. And then there was the cheating. Oh, he never bothered to hide it. Lipstick stains on his collar, perfume clinging to his jacket, late-night calls he wouldn't step outside to take. He flaunted his ex-girlfriend at company dinners, laughing too loud at her jokes, brushing her hand when he thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes I wondered if he wanted me to see, if humiliating me gave him some sort of twisted satisfaction. The worst part, I stayed. For 7 years I stayed through every sneer, every betrayal, every night he came home smelling of another woman. Why? Because the thought of being alone terrified me more than the cruelty itself. See, I grew up in a house where love was something you had to beg for. My father left when I was 8, just vanished one day, leaving my mother and me behind. And my mother, she never recovered. She drowned herself in work and silence, barely looking at me, barely asking how I felt. I became invisible long before Martin made me feel that way. So when Martin came along and he chose me, even if his love was conditional, even if it was cruel, I told myself it was better than nothing, better than being abandoned again. But deep down, every night when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I knew this wasn't a marriage. It was a prison. The saddest part? I didn't even hate him. I hated myself more, for letting it happen, for shrinking smaller and smaller every day just to fit into the box he shoved me in. And yet, I told myself to endure. To smile at gatherings, to play the dutiful wife, to convince everyone, including myself, that I wasn't dying inside. But here's the thing about lies. They always unravel. And mine unraveled on Thanksgiving Day. Because that was the day I came home, hoping at least for the comfort of routine, of Martin scolding, of him demanding dinner, of the same cold silence we lived in. And instead, I found something far worse. I found the house empty, no Martin, no sound of him stomping through the halls, just a note on the table. And what that note said, that was the moment my life took a turn I could never have imagined. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. When I was a little girl, it was the only day my family felt whole. My father would still be around then, carving the turkey, while my mother hummed in the kitchen, pretending for a few hours that she was happy. And me, I'd sit there soaking it all in, memorizing every sound, every smell, because I knew once the day ended, so would the warmth. That's why, even as an adult, I held on to Thanksgiving. I told myself it would be the day things felt different. The day Martin and I might eat together without arguing, the day I might feel like I belonged at my own table. But that year was different from the moment I pulled into the driveway. His car was gone, the one he never let anyone else drive. It wasn't in the garage. It wasn't parked outside, just gone. The house looked dead. No light spilling out of the windows, no sign of life inside. A part of me told myself not to panic. Maybe he went to the store. Maybe he forgot something for dinner. But the closer I got to the front door, the heavier my chest felt. When I pushed the door open, the silence hit me first. Usually Martin would be in the living room, already complaining about how late I was, or how the turkey wasn't cooked right. But the air was still, too still. And then I saw it. A folded piece of paper on the dining table. My heart thudded as I picked it up. For a second I prayed it was a shopping list or some kind of note that made sense. But no. His handwriting sprawled across the page, sharp and rushed. I'm away for the holiday, don't wait up. Be useful for once and take care of my stepmother. She's in the guest room. I read it once, twice, and then a third time because I couldn't believe it. Gone. He was gone. On Thanksgiving. Not only that, he left me with a chore, like I was the maid, not his wife. Like I wasn't even worth the courtesy of a phone call. My knees buckled and I sank into the nearest chair, clutching that note in my hands. My throat burned, my chest ached. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the words until all I could see was the one line that cut me deeper than the rest. Be useful for once. That's all I was to him. Not a wife, not a partner, just something to be useful, and I knew exactly where he had gone. With her, his ex, the woman he never stopped comparing me to. The one who haunted every dinner party, every whispered phone call. I pictured them together, maybe holding hands at some cozy restaurant, laughing while I sat here abandoned. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. I wanted to scream, to tear the note into pieces, to pack my bags and never come back. But instead, I just sat there trembling, too broken to move. For a while, I thought I was alone, completely alone in that cold, empty house. And maybe that was the cruelest part. On the one holiday meant for family, I had none. But then, a sound. It was faint at first, so soft I thought maybe I imagined it. A scratch in the silence. Then it came again. A cough. A weak, raspy cough echoing from down the hallway. I froze. My tears stilled on my cheeks, my heart beating loud enough to drown out everything else. The note. Take care of my stepmother. She's in the guest room. I had almost forgotten. In my own pain, in my own heartbreak, I hadn't thought about her. Martin's stepmother. A woman I barely knew. A woman he spoke about with nothing but contempt. And now she was here, in my house, alone. I wiped at my eyes with the back of my sleeve and sat there, torn. Part of me wanted to stay rooted to that chair, to drown in my own misery. But that cough came again, louder this time, pulling me to my feet before I could think twice. My legs felt heavy as I walked toward the hallway, every step filled with hesitation. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if she'd be kind or cold, if she'd even want me there. All I knew was that I wasn't as alone as I thought. And as my hand reached for the doorknob of the guest room, I had no idea that the woman behind it was about to change my life forever. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and the first thing I noticed was how small she looked. Agnes Martin's stepmother. I had seen her only once before, at our wedding. She was in the back row wearing a pale dress that seemed too big for her frame. Nobody really spoke to her that day. I remember Martin rolling his eyes when I asked who she was. The woman who latched onto my father for money, he had muttered. His siblings weren't kinder. They always called her a burden, as if she were nothing but an inconvenience tied to their family name. And now here she was, lying in the guest bed, her frail body sinking into the sheets. Her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun, her face pale but her eyes still carried a spark, a sharpness. She looked at me, surprised, as if she hadn't expected anyone to walk in. I didn't expect anyone to be here, she said softly. Her voice trembled but carried a strange strength. He usually leaves me to myself. For a moment, I couldn't find my words. My chest was still heavy from the note I'd read earlier, my heart still bleeding from the knowledge that my husband had chosen another woman on Thanksgiving. I wanted to run back to my room, to curl into myself and drown in tears. But there was something in her tone, loneliness, quiet pain, that stopped me. I swallowed hard and managed to whisper. He left me a note. Said I should take care of you. She gave a small, almost bitter smile. Of course he did. That smile told me everything. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't even hurt. It was as if being abandoned, being shoved aside, was something she had learned to live with. I stood there awkwardly for a while, not knowing what else to do. But then I noticed how dry her lips looked, how tired her face seemed. Without thinking too much, I went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and brought it back to her. Her hands shook when she reached for the mug. I steadied it, holding it with her until she managed a sip. You don't have to, she whispered. I know, I said quietly. But I want to. Her eyes softened. For a moment I thought I saw tears glistening there, though she quickly blinked them away. That night, instead of drowning in my own heartbreak, I sat with her. I pulled a chair close to her bed, and we talked. Well, mostly she talked, and I listened. She told me about little things, how she liked her tea with honey, how she used to tend a small garden before her health got worse, how silence was easier than listening to people speak cruel words. Her voice was halting at times, her breaths shallow, but she kept talking, and I kept listening, soaking up every word like I'd been starving for conversation. Because in a way, I had. For years, Martin had spoken over me, dismissed me, silenced me. But here, sitting beside Agnes, I didn't feel invisible. I felt needed. And when she smiled faintly at one of my small replies, I felt something inside me stir. A warmth I hadn't felt in a very long time. The hours slipped by. At some point, I forgot about Martin, forgot about his ex, forgot about the note that had shattered me. All that mattered was that an old woman, left behind and forgotten, finally had someone to sit with her on Thanksgiving night. When I finally stood to leave, Agnes caught my hand. Her grip was weak but insistent. You remind me of myself, she whispered. Too much heart in a house that doesn't deserve it. Her words sank deep into me. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat too tight to answer. I thought that night was just about kindness, about keeping her company. I didn't know it was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and even myself. But as I turned off the light and left her to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that fate had placed us both in that house for a reason, and I had no idea just how much her story was about to become mine. Days blurred into weeks. Martin never came home, not once. He didn't call to check in, didn't ask how I was doing, didn't care if I was eating or sleeping. The only proof of his existence were the occasional cold clipped messages that buzzed on my phone. Make yourself useful. Don't forget to give her her pills. Keep the place in order. Not how are you, not I miss you. Just instructions. I should have been used to it by then. His indifference, his cruelty. But there was something about the silence of the house, the emptiness of our bed, that made those messages cut deeper than usual. And yet, in his absence, something unexpected began to grow. Agnes and I fell into a rhythm. We ate together. At first, it was just small meals I brought her on a tray, soups, sandwiches, tea. But then she began asking me to sit with her, and I did. We watched silly television shows, laughing at things that weren't even that funny, but it felt good to laugh. Sometimes she'd drift off in the middle of a scene, her head tilting to the side, and I'd cover her with a blanket. And slowly, as trust built between us, she started sharing pieces of her life. It happened one evening as the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. I had made her chamomile tea, and we were both sitting quietly, the glow of the lamp softening the room. Out of nowhere, she spoke. You know, I married Martin's father late in life, she said, her voice faint but steady. He was kind to me, kinder than anyone had ever been. But from the beginning, Martin and his siblings hated me. I turned toward her, listening. They decided I was after his money, she continued. They mocked me behind my back, sometimes to my face. They never invited me to family gatherings, never asked me to sit at their table. And when their father died... She paused, her lips trembling. When he died, they left me in that big house, alone, as if I'd never mattered at all. Her hands shook as she placed her cup on the nightstand. I gave them everything I could. I tried to love them. I really did, but to them, I was never family, just a shadow they wanted gone. Her voice cracked on that last word, and something inside me broke. Because I knew exactly what that felt like. The feeling of being invisible in your own home, of giving love and receiving nothing but rejection in return. Of wondering if maybe, just maybe, you were the problem all along. My eyes burned with tears, but I didn't want her to see me cry. Still, she noticed. She always noticed. "You know what I mean, don't you?" she asked softly. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. She reached out then, her thin hand covering mine. Her skin was cool, fragile, but her grip was steady. "You've been starved of love too." That was the first time anyone had ever said it aloud to me, and it was the truth. Both of us, branded as outsiders in our own homes. Both of us left to carry emptiness where love should have been. And so, I made a choice. For once in my life, I chose to give love instead of waiting, begging, hoping for it to be given to me. I cooked for her, not because Martin told me to, but because I wanted her to have warm meals made with care. I brushed her hair on quiet afternoons, listening as she told me about the garden she used to have, about the roses she planted but never saw bloom. I sat beside her bed at night when the pain was too much, holding her hand until she finally drifted to sleep. And in doing all that, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was wasting my life. I didn't feel useless or invisible. I felt needed, seen, loved. Agnes gave me something Martin never could, a place where my presence mattered. One night, as she drifted off, she whispered, "If I'd had a daughter, I'd want her to be just like you." I sat there in the dark, holding back sobs, because nobody had ever said something so kind to me before. And yet, as the days went on, I couldn't ignore the way her health was slipping. Her coughs grew harsher, her energy faded quicker, and sometimes she'd stare off into the distance, as if she knew her time was running out. I tried to stay strong for her. But late at night, alone in my room, fear wrapped itself around me, because I knew what was coming, and I didn't know if my heart could take losing the only person who had ever made me feel like I wasn't invisible. That winter came cruel and unforgiving. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and the cold seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Agnes's health declined faster than I could have ever prepared for. The doctors came and went with the same tired words: rest, comfort, keep her warm. But no medicine, no visit, no prescription could slow what was happening. So I stayed by her side. I sat through every appointment, scribbling notes even though deep down I knew it wouldn't change the outcome. I held her hand through every sleepless night, when her pain kept her awake and her body shook with weakness. And when the tears came, hers and mine, I let them fall, unashamed. She never asked for Martin, not once, and he never asked for her. It was just us. Two women who weren't supposed to matter, clinging to each other as the world pretended we didn't exist. Then Thanksgiving came. I hadn't planned anything at first. It felt cruel to celebrate when she could hardly eat. But that morning, Agnes surprised me. "Make something special," she whispered. "Even if it's small, we should have one good holiday together." So I did. I spent hours in the kitchen, cooking as best I could with what little we had. A small chicken instead of a turkey, mashed potatoes, a pie I nearly burned because my hands were shaking the whole time. It wasn't perfect, not even close. But when I carried the plates into her room, her eyes lit up like I had given her a feast. "This," she said, her voice thin but full of warmth, "is the happiest holiday I've had in decades." I tried to smile, but my throat ached too much. "You've given me something my own stepchildren never did," she continued. "You gave me family, and just like that, I broke." I set the food down and covered my face, sobbing quietly so she wouldn't feel guilty for saying it. She reached out with her frail hand, brushing away my tears. "Don't cry, my dear," she whispered. "This isn't the end. What you've given me will stay, even when I'm gone." Her words felt like a goodbye, even though she was still right there. That night, after the dishes were washed and the house was silent again, I lay awake in my room listening to the faint sound of her breathing down the hall. Every uneven breath made my heart twist. I knew the time was near, and I hated myself for wishing I could freeze time just for one more week, one more day, one more Thanksgiving. But a few days later, it happened. I was sitting by her bed, humming softly, her hand curled in mine. Her skin had grown so thin, her grip so light it felt like holding a shadow. She looked at me one last time, her lips moving without sound. And then, as gently as a candle burning out, she was gone. I didn't let go. I couldn't. I sat there for hours, clutching her hand, my tears soaking the blanket. Because for the first time in years, I had felt what it was like to belong, to matter, to be loved. And in a single breath it was taken away. The house grew unbearably quiet. Too quiet. And with Martin's return hanging like a storm cloud on the horizon, I realized something terrifying. Agnes was gone, and now I was completely alone. The funeral was quiet. Too quiet for a woman who had given so much love in her last months. The church was barely half filled, the air thick with the smell of old flowers and dust. I sat in the front row, my hands clutching the small handkerchief Agnes used to keep by her bed. Martin showed up late. His siblings were with him, all dressed in black, their faces blank. They walked down the aisle like actors in a play, their expressions practiced, their grief non-existent. Not one of them had visited her in her final days, not one of them had called, yet here they were, dressed for the part. I didn't move when they passed by me. Martin didn't even look my way. He sat in the front, shoulders straight, his jaw tight. But I noticed how his eyes scanned the crowd, as if measuring who had come, not to honor Agnes, but to witness him. The ceremony went on, the pastor speaking kind words over the casket, words that felt both right and wrong. Right because Agnes deserved every bit of kindness spoken over her. Wrong because none of the people who needed to hear it cared. I wept silently. Not just for Agnes, but for myself. She had been my one safe place, my one proof that I wasn't invisible. And now she was gone. The world felt cold again, even colder than before. After the burial, when the last bit of soil was placed over her grave, the lawyer stepped forward and quietly asked the family to follow him. My stomach tightened, the reading of the will. We gathered in a small room at the back of the church. A heavy wooden table sat in the middle, the lawyer already seated with a stack of papers before him. Martin and his siblings shuffled in with an energy I hadn't seen all day. For the first time, they looked alive, leaning forward, eyes sharp, anticipation buzzing between them. I stayed near the back, my heart heavy, still clutching Agnes's handkerchief. "Let's get this over with," one of Martin's sisters muttered. "I already know what she left us." Martin smirked at that, leaning back in his chair. "Don't get your hopes up. She respected me more than anyone else. I took care of things after Dad died. If she left anything, it'll be under my name." His words stung because they were lies. He hadn't lifted a finger for her. He hadn't even been there when she needed someone to bring her a glass of water. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read. It started formally, the usual legal words that didn't mean much to anyone. The siblings shifted impatiently, waiting for the moment that confirmed their assumptions. Then came the part that silenced the room. "To Lydia," the lawyer read, his voice steady, "who showed me the love my own family denied me. I leave everything. My estate, my assets, my wealth, all that I own. To my stepchildren, I leave nothing, for they gave me nothing." The words struck me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I stared at the lawyer, certain I had misheard, but the silence that followed told me I hadn't. Martin's smirk disappeared. His face froze, pale and rigid. His siblings erupted almost instantly. "This is a joke," one of them shouted. "She was manipulated." Another cried, "She didn't know what she was doing." The lawyer didn't flinch. "The will is signed, sealed, and notarized. It's airtight. There is no room for contest." The shouting grew louder, accusations flying in every direction. "She tricked her. She's a gold digger." Agnes was sick. She didn't know any better. I sat frozen, my hands trembling so hard the handkerchief slipped onto the floor. My chest tightened, not with pride or triumph, but with grief so heavy I could hardly bear it. Billions, that's what he had said. All of it left to me. But what did it mean, when the one person who gave it was gone? What good was money when the house would still be empty, the halls still silent, the chair at the kitchen table forever vacant? I wanted to cry out that they were wrong, that I hadn't asked for any of this, that all I had wanted was love. And Agnes had given it to me, not through money, not through property, but through the warmth of her presence. Yet none of them saw me, they only saw the inheritance. Martin finally turned toward me, his eyes burning with rage. "You planned this," he hissed. "Didn't you? You wormed your way in. You knew exactly what you were doing." I didn't, I whispered, but my voice was drowned out by his siblings' fury. "She's lying. She doesn't deserve a cent. She's not even family." I flinched with every word, but I stayed seated. Agnes had told me once, "The truth doesn't need to shout. It speaks for itself." So I said nothing. The lawyer repeated firmly, "Everything belongs to Lydia." That was Agnes's final wish. The room went still, except for the sound of Martin's fists tightening against the table. His smirk was gone, his arrogance cracked, and for the first time in years I saw something new in his eyes, fear. But I wasn't celebrating. I was in shock, my heart still aching for the woman I had lost. I had walked into that room with nothing but grief, and now I was walking out with everything she had once owned. Everything. And I didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. The house felt different after the will was read. The silence was still there, but it no longer pressed against me like it used to. I would sit in the living room sometimes, Agnes's blanket draped over my shoulders, and feel her presence in the air. It gave me strength, even on the loneliest days. But soon, the silence was broken by knocks at the door. They started small at first, one of Martin's sisters showing up with a polite smile, holding a basket of muffins she clearly hadn't baked. "We should spend more time together," she said, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp. "We're family, after all." Then his brother appeared, pretending to be concerned. I know things were tense before, but Agnes would want us to stay close. His words dripped with insincerity, like oil floating on water. I said little, offering short nods until they left. But the real storm came one evening when I opened the door and found Martin standing there. He looked nothing like the man who used to walk around this house with arrogance dripping from every step. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept in days. He held a bouquet of flowers in his hands, the stems trembling as he extended them toward me. "Lydia," he said softly, almost brokenly, I made mistakes. That was what he called the years of humiliation, the cheating, the note he left me on Thanksgiving telling me to be useful. He sank to his knees on the porch, the flowers falling between us. "Please, I need you. She left you everything. We can start over. I'll change, I swear. She left me, the one I was with. She's gone. You're all I have." For a moment, I just looked at him. This was the man I had once begged to love me, the man I had feared losing. And now here he was, begging at my feet. His siblings weren't far behind either. They came on different days, some with tears, others with anger disguised as desperation. We didn't mean the things we said. We were hurt. You understand, don't you? You're not cruel. Every word felt like poison dressed as honey. But I wasn't the same Lydia anymore. The Lydia who walked into this house months ago had been a shadow of herself, terrified of abandonment, desperate for crumbs of affection. But Agnes had changed that. She had shown me that love wasn't proven by blood or promises, it was proven by actions, and Martin's actions had been clear. I looked down at him, still on his knees, the flowers crushed between his hands. "You left me to be useful," I said, my voice steady, cold. "And I was. Just not for you. My lawyers will contact you for the divorce papers." His face crumpled. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Then I closed the door. The sound echoed through the house, final and sharp. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt for choosing myself. I didn't feel fear of being alone, because I wasn't. Agnes's love still lived inside me, her lessons etched into my heart. And as I stood there, the bouquet still lying on the porch outside, I realized something. I wasn't abandoned anymore. I was free. When I look back now, I see my story wasn't really about money. Yes, the inheritance changed my life in ways I could never have imagined, but that wasn't the gift Agnes left me. The real gift was awakening. I learned that staying in a loveless marriage out of fear only keeps you trapped in misery. I learned that begging for crumbs of affection is no way to live. I learned that blood doesn't always make family. Love does. Compassion does. Choosing to care when everyone else turns away does. Agnes died with peace in her heart because one person chose to see her. And I lived with strength because one woman reminded me I was worthy of love. For years I thought I had nothing to offer. But Agnes showed me that being present, being kind, and being brave is everything. That's the legacy she left behind. Not the billions, but the courage to finally shut the door on cruelty and open my life to love, dignity, and respect. So if you're listening, I want you to hear this. You are worthy too. Don't let fear chain you to people who belittle or abandon you. Don't mistake shared blood for loyalty. Family is built in the moments of kindness, in the choices we make to stand by each other. That is the lesson I carry with me. That is the inheritance that will last a lifetime. If Lydia's story touched you today, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes, a story is all it takes to remind us we deserve better.